Hello, First Congregational Church. Pastor Sharon here, and I want to give you an update on where we are with visioning and the visioning process. You might remember that in October, we had a big worship service, being able to share with as many people as possible where we were in the visioning process, because we're getting so close to the very end of it. And we had hoped that the next steps would go a little more quickly, but things happen, life happens. And so our Visioning Action Steps team is just now getting to come together, but I'll tell you more about that in a minute. I want to step back for a second and remind you of some of the steps that we saw. These are the steps that have already happened in this process. And you may, if you were part of that worship service in early October, have seen this timeline. Back in March of 2021, the Minister for Church Vitality of our Pacific Northwest Conference led us through a training, a deep listening training, with several members who attended. And then spring in 2021, we had those who had been trained in deep listening interview community leaders, colleague ministries, and congregational leaders. So they went out into our congregation and interviewed folk in our congregation, neighbors in our community who are doing great work and what they experience of us at First Congregational, and community leaders. So everything from Interfaith Coalition to the library to just folks in our community, as well as First Congregational members. Then in the summer of 2021, we began backyard conversations in which all of you were invited to engage, and we took notes of the conversations that happened there. Then this past Lent in 2022, we did an all-members survey, inviting folk to respond to a number of different questions. And we did that in different ways, both written and sending it out by email. And we also asked different questions that would tap into different type of learners, different type of ways that we experience the world, so that we could solicit as much information from you as possible. And when I say we, this is council. This was church council who led many of these processes, just to say who that we is. In Lent of 2022, we also had visioning gatherings that both I and Pastor Davi and the moderators of the church led. So that was this past Lent in 2022. So those were great, where we solicited in-person conversations similar to what was happening with the all-member survey. And then this past summer in 2022, Pastor Piwa was here to kind of pull out some final aspects of this process. And then when I returned from sabbatical in September, a team of us went through all of the data that we had gathered over the last year or so, trying to pull it all together. And that's when on October 2nd, I think it was, we presented an outline about what our findings were telling us. And that was in that worship service where we also solicited your responses, both online and in person, and later for those who watched the worship service later, about how we wanted to make those steps actionable, and asked what was missing. So what we found, what has been revealed in all of that data gathering from church council and those who'd been trained and worship service, was this sense of going deeper, a faith vision that was about going deeper. And it was in 3 different arenas that we found were the strongest. And in that worship service, we described the first one as going deeper in our congregation in terms of relationships. The love for this congregation came through in every visioning step these last years. what really emerged is a desire for those connections to go deeper. The pandemic has really changed who we are as a worshiping body. And so finding ways to connect with each other in our spiritual selves, in our personal selves, that came out as a strong foundation that was needed from all of you. The desire to have small groups where we could share with each other, for choirs to be able to develop, and we've seen that happening, not just choirs, but other musical groups, places like covenant groups to become stronger, where we can interact with each other on a deep level, sharing what this faith journey is about and what God is what God means for all of us, what community means for all of us. These connections have been frayed a little bit throughout the pandemic. And so going deeper in our congregation through relationships is that first part of this vision. Going deeper in our community, particularly around homelessness, because that has been a part of First Congregational's ministry since the very beginning, but at least for the last many decades. How do we want to go deeper in regards to homelessness in our community? Working with the Ground Floor, the Interfaith Coalition, maybe partnering with the city of Bellingham. What action steps are we going to take in that regard? And then the third one that we came to was going deeper in our world, which is around creation care. Creation care is something that we all recognize is significant for this time and place as we continue to try to follow Christ and build the kingdom of God that Christ declared. That affects our entire world, and creation care is a part of that. And kind of going in and out and between each of these three sections is continuing to recognize how race and cultural aspects affect all of this ministry. How do we want to work with the indigenous folk in our community? What do they have to say about environmental care? What do they have to say about how affordable housing affects them in this time in Whatcom County? So knowing that these are the three sections that came out of the last few years of soliciting feedback from all of you to go deeper in these sections, where are we going then? So the church council recognized that we needed a group of folk to be able to work on the action steps that would go within each of these three arenas, going deeper within First Congregational, in our community around homelessness, and in regards to creation care. What are the steps that what is ours to do at First Congregational Church? So a Visioning Action Steps team was created. Vast Visioning Action Steps team was created by Church Council, inviting folk from the whole congregation to be part of it. The council agreed on this group. I'll give you their names. Thank you to each of them who have agreed to serve. We looked for folk who were longtime members as well as brand new members. We looked for folk of different generations, people who have children at home and those who are older, because we recognize that we are a diverse congregation and want to have different folk bringing this to us. So that Visioning Action Steps team, VAST, is made of Bill Henkel, who is our current past moderator, Kelly Larini, Mona Garcia-Slagle, Paula McGrath, Barbara Matherschmidt, Megan Brown Douglas, Scout Mitchell, and I'll serve as the staff liaison to this committee. Now, the hope had been that they would be able to get their work started. When I first, in the worship service, presented this, we had this timeline that said in November and December, we would have the Visioning Action Steps team gather and start to pull together what you had responded from that worship service in October. Now, that team has actually just gotten started. And so we won't have something, immediately. But my hope is that at our congregational meeting, our annual congregational meeting, we'll have something as a draft to present that says, here are some ideas. And so going forward, what it'll look like is that team will begin looking at the action steps that you sent in, that you responded to in that worship service, and start putting them under those 3 arenas for our vision. And then bring that draft back to the congregation, not in congregational meeting maybe, but in venues like email, and sending it out to all of you and having it up in the narthex for folk to say, yes, this seems like us, this seems like ours to do. No, this doesn't quite fit for me, so I'm not going to mark that one. But so that we could go back and forth between the VAST and the members of the congregation to finalize a visioning document that then will go to a congregational meeting. Again, I hope we will have a draft for this upcoming annual meeting, but it might be a later congregational meeting that we'll have a finalized draft to vote on. So what else is about where we're going? Putting the steps into each of these sections is very important, but alongside, we're also having conversations about staffing and how does staffing fit within our visioning. If that first foundational piece is about going deeper within our congregation, the word I've been using around that is nurturing one another in the spirit, in our connection with one another and connection with Christ's ministry in this place, so that we can move out into the world and so that we can continue building on the homelessness ministries and creation care ministries. What staffing do we need to consider as part of this? Now, maybe there's no change whatsoever, but I don't know that is what is faithful. If that nurturing, if that going deeper in our congregation is accurate. And so Church Council is going to be looking at some proposals from personnel about what the possibilities are. We've been in conversation a little bit with Faith Formation Board. That's personnel, I should say, has been in conversation a little bit with Faith Formation Board. And I will hopefully be meeting with Mission and Justice Board this week. Because again, looking at these core categories of going deeper in our congregation and our relationships around the ministries of homelessness and around the ministries of creation care. How do we best serve that as a staff? What does that look like? So these are some of the conversations that are happening. There have been no decisions made yet. Overall, we're just trying to update you on where things are, because it's a lot, and it's been happening a lot in council. And so you'll see that our council packets are now being posted in the Friday announcements so that you can all try to stay as up to date as possible on the things that are happening. Because again, through this pandemic, it has been hard to keep communication flowing. And so we want to hear your questions. Your moderator, Beth Tyne, your vice moderator, Mark Schofield, and your past moderator, Bill Henkel, are all a part of this, as is the entirety of council. So please share your questions, talk with your ministry area coordinators, your MACs, and pray for this process. Pray for the Spirit to continue being visible as we look forward to who we are becoming, or really it's who we are, but where we're led in this next time. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being a part of this whole process as First Congregational Church. It is a joy to serve in this ministry with you. Thanks be to God.